Animal Crossing New Horizon has been an absolute revolution, jam-packed with all kinds of goodies to keep people wrapped up in the gameplay and coming back to curate and share their island. Nintendo has done an amazing job with the game, and I can't go more than about 5 minutes without seeing some posts about it on social media. While I would love to be on an island, off by myself right now, World Events has made me feel, well, a bit more secluded than I once was, and I miss the good old days. You know, the simpler times, when we were all just city folk. So in honor of missing the good old days, I thought I might try my hand at making a KK slider, custom amiibo, in a city folk, low polygon aesthetic. So as mentioned in the intro, I wanted to go for a low polygon aesthetic. So I figured the best place to start was with the actual source material, you know, the actual game itself. After having a good enough excuse to revisit the game, I said what the heck and downloaded a KK slider model which had been ripped directly from City Folk. With the model in hand, the next step was to import it into Blender. Blender's a 3D modeling software that will allow me to manipulate the 3D model as I see fit. Now before we get too far into this, let me just say that I'm not any kind of expert in Blender, and it took me a while to even figure out how to use it. So by default, the 3D model is in what's called a T-pose. So my idea was to manipulate KK so he'd be waving to you with his guitar on his back. It would have been a bit too cliche to have him playing the guitar, and there's already an official amiibo in that pose, so I opted not to go down that path. The other thing I want to note is he lacks any kind of facial features. This includes eyes, nose, and a mouth. In the games, these are represented by flat images that get put on top of the 3D model. I opted to take a similar approach and draw them in. I could have modeled them pretty easily in 3D, but it felt a little bit disingenuous considering the source material. Well, with the 3D model complete, the next step is to export an STL file from Blender and 3D print it. So to 3D print it, I'm going to use an Epax X1 resin 3D printer. Now, this printer is absolutely amazing and has served me very well since I acquired it over a year ago. And the best part is since this uses UV light and resin, it's going to come out super high quality without any visible print lines. So I'm going to print this in some eSun white resin. Now unfortunately the resin does tend to come out a little bit darker after going through the UV curing process, but I got an idea on how to take care of that a little bit later on. With the 3D print complete, it's time for a wash down with some IPA and a little UV light bath to fully cure the resin. So as previously mentioned, after the UV curing, the white resin did come out a little bit darker. Now normally I think the way to do this would just be to go get some spray paint and spray paint it white. However, it is a pandemic and I didn't feel the need to go out. So my solution was to use a little bit of clear UV resin and add some white pigment to it and just paint over the 3D print. Now, like I said, this was definitely the slower, not as efficient way to do it, but hey, at the end of the day, it actually turned out pretty well. It just took 3 or 4 coats to actually make it look good. For the guitar, I did something similar and I just used some dark brown mica powder and mixed it with a little bit of UV clear resin. It was pretty straightforward and it had the added effect which gave it a little bit more depth, so hey, it's a little bit more interesting overall. So with KK looking pretty good, and the guitar looking good, it's time for the part of the project that I've been dreading since the very beginning, which is hand drawing in the facial features to the model. So the way I handled this was to find a picture online and trace over all the facial elements with a pencil. Then I used that to transfer those over to the model and then Sharpie them in. While I did this to be true to the original source material, I think if I were to do this again, I would just 3D model the eyes, nose, and mouth, printed them separately, painted them, and just glued them onto the amiibo. Either way, I'm still pretty happy with the end result, but feel free to let me know how I jacked it up in the comments below. Off camera, I hit the guitar and KK with some matte clear coat and began to wrap up the project by affixing the guitar to KK and KK to the base of the amiibo. I affixed everything using a little bit of UV clear resin. Now I said this was going to be an Amiibo, right? Well, yeah, of course. So before I affixed the two halves of the base of the Amiibo together, I programmed an NFC chip to act as the KK Slider Amiibo. If you're curious how to do this process yourself, make sure you check out the card in the upper right hand corner, as I've done a full tutorial that shows exactly how to do this. And with all the hard work out of the way, this is done and it's finally time to admire our work. This was a bit of a different project for me, but I was super happy with the end result. The Amiibo turned out amazing, and I was really happy that I learned a new skill in the process. If you'd like to give this a shot, I left all my 3D model files in the description below, including those that you can import directly into Chi2Box with all supports already in there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you check out this other video where I did an awesome custom Guiji Amiibo, and I'll see you in that video.